Hello, I hope you are well. I'm going to tell you everything that I read in October. I read quite a few bits. I read some short stories, I read a fairy tale, I read some stuff aloud on the channel that I'm going to talk about, and I read 2 novels. So I'm going to talk about all that, but I wanted to quickly say why Halloween just finished very abruptly is my camera actually stopped working, and I actually bought a brand new camera, and I'm holding a microphone that I got as well. So hopefully the sound is crisper and clearer, and hopefully this all looks better now that I have this new camera. So that's why Halloween stopped, is because my camera stopped, so I have no way of filming. So I think Halloween went really well. I did almost every day in October a new video. I filmed more than I uploaded. Some videos I filmed and I just thought, I don't want to put that up. I only wanted it to be videos that I thought were good enough to put up. We had discussions, we had book hauls, we had vlog, had everything in there. So I'm very happy with Halloween this year. I think this is the first time I've done it the way I've wanted it to and got as many videos up and really enjoyed it this year. So I'm thinking around Christmas, December, I might do a video every day. I'm not sure. The schedule, I think, is going to be a few videos a week because I'm just feeling so inspired to make videos, to be honest. So I'm just going to probably carry on making a load of videos. So today I'm going to give you everything that I read in October. I'm going to start with the Tay Book Club book. So Tay Book Club is a book club I run on this channel. I finished Splinter by A J Howard, but I'm not going to say much about it here. It's a Alice in Wonderland kind of retelling, but it's about a girl who her great-grandmother was Alice from the Alice in Wonderland stories, and she met Lewis Carroll, and Lewis Carroll wrote up all the stuff that she told him. And she said, I've been to Wonderland, and it wasn't just a fantasy or a story, it was her real life tale that she told to Lewis Carroll. Everyone thought she was mad. The girl in it is a teenage girl. Her mother is in a mental hospital, and everyone thinks the girl's mum is just insane because she talks about Wonderland as well. So the girl decides that she needs to go to Wonderland herself and undo the curse that is over her family to save her mother, because her father is going to put her mother through electric shock treatment, and she just wants to stop him from doing that. So she's going to go to Wonderland, she's going to confront everyone there and rewrite the wrongs that were done originally. There is a love interest called Jeb. I loved the romance in it, but I don't want to go on too much here because you know the drill. I put up a picture of this book on my Instagram. The picture I chose is when I took it on holiday. It's got a willow over it, and leave your reviews on that picture. Then I will get all the reviews together and I will do a review video of my review and then reading out your reviews and discussing comments that you've made about the book as well. I really enjoyed this. I'll just say it here. I really enjoyed it. It was so creepy. I think the original story is creepy, but this, like one of the flowers sneezed and the seeds came out of her face and she was like, my eyes have gone. I was like, what on earth is going on here? And then the rabbit. Oh, well, I'm going to save my thoughts for my full book review video, but I did really enjoy it. But it really felt like horror to me, really, really creepy. Then let's go on to another really, really creepy book, Snow White. This is the original Brothers Grimm. Snow White, I read aloud on the channel, which I'll link that video down below. If you have not heard the original Snow White, you have to. You have to just know that the Disney film, there's no kiss. You know the kiss when Snow White at the end of Disney, he kisses her true love. There's no kiss. Someone basically is so clumsy, they drop the coffin. She's in a glass coffin. They drop it. They fall over their own feet. Drop her coffin. The bit of apple that was the poisonous apple. She chokes up. She's like, chokes it up. And that's how she's alive. There's no romance within it. I was shocked. The end. Oh, God, the end. Oh, was so twisted. So this is the original Snow White that I read aloud on the channel. I will link it down below if you want to know what the original Snow White is. I find it very repetitive, but I do with a lot of old fairy tales, especially Brother Grimm. I don't find Hans Christian Andersen as repetitive, but I think that's what children like, is that repetitive nature within books. So if you don't know the story, there's a queen, or if you don't know the original Brothers Grimm, you probably know the Disney version, but the Brothers Grimm version is very different. So there is this beautiful queen at the beginning, and she is sewing, and all of a sudden she pricks her finger, and outside it's snowing, and her blood gets on her embroidery, and she says, I would love a daughter as white as snow, Snow White. She has a daughter. The queen dies. The king remarries this very vain woman who has a magic mirror. She says into it, who's the fairest of them all? And the mirror always replies, you queen, you queen. Snow White then grows up and comes of age, and the mirror replies, Snow White is the fairest of them all. The queen pays a huntsman to kill Snow White. So he takes Snow White deep into the dark woods, and he's about to kill her, and he has been told to cut out certain organs from Snow White to bring back to the queen as proof that he has killed Snow White. So he takes her into the woods, and Snow White just pleads with him, and she is so beautiful and she is so pure of heart that he cannot kill her. So he says to her, go, run. And he thinks, well, she's going to end up dead in the woods anyway, because these animals, these wolves, are going to get her. So I just leave her. He kills a nearby animal, cuts out its organs, takes it to the queen. She thinks that's Snow White's organs. She fries them up and eats them. So cannibalism is in the original Snow. So there's murder, then there's cannibalism. And then she goes to her mirror, and her mirror says, Snow White is still the fairest of them all, living with the 7 dwarfs. The mirror is a little bit of a snitch. How it was like, oh, you know, Snow White in the woods with the dwarfs. I was like, don't give her clues. Don't tell her where Snow White is. Little snitch of a mirror. So she then decides that she is going to use her magic, her dark magic, to get Snow White. So she dresses as an old woman, puts a spell on herself, and then she does several different things. So obviously from the Disney version, she has a poisonous apple, and that's what gets Snow White. But that's not what the story is. The story is several different tries. So Snow White in the woods runs to a cottage where the dwarfs are living. They are out at the time. It was very like Goldilocks. This bowl and that bed and this size, and it felt very Goldilocks-y, that bit to me. And then the dwarfs come back. They agree that she can stay there as long as she cooks and cleans. As long as she's a living maid, she is allowed to stay there for them, and they go off to work in the mines. And they say to her, the evil witch is probably coming for you still, so you need to not open the door to anyone. Snow White is so pure of heart, and she's so trusting that she opens the door to the witch, who is in disguise as an old woman. And it starts with lace for a corset, which I loved that. So the woman says, let me lace your corset. I've got these fine laces of different colours. So Snow White buys a lace from her for her corset, and the old lady says, let me lace up the corset. And she laces the corset so tight it suffocates Snow White. The dwarfs come home. They manage to resuscitate her. The queen's plan hasn't worked. She goes back to the mirror. Who's the fairest of them all? It's Snow White. That's the repetitiveness of it. She then gets a poisonous comb, and she sells this to Snow White, and she puts the poisonous comb through Snow White's hair, and Snow White's out like a light. The dwarfs come back. They resuscitate. Who's the fairest of them? It's Snow White. And then I'm turning into a panto here. If you don't know what pantos are, I don't know if you have them in the rest of the world, but in England, tell me if you have them in America. In England, pantos are fairy tales. So there'll be Cinderella, but it will be very interactive with the audience, and the audience is normally children. And it'll be, hiss behind you. Where is it? Hiss behind you. Boo, hiss when the villains come on. So I love a good panto. Anyway, sorry, off topic. So she then comes up with the idea of the poisonous apple, and half of the apple is poisonous, half of it isn't. So she goes to Snow White once again and says, do you want to buy an apple? And Snow White goes, oh, I don't know if I should. And the old woman says, well, let me buy half of the apple and you can have the other half of the apple, to prove to you that this apple is absolutely fine. Now, she's only put poison on one side of the apple, so Snow White eats the poisonous side of the apple. She's out. She's dead. Snow White's done. The dwarfs think she is so beautiful, they decide to put her in a glass coffin. And she just looks like she's sleeping, and they know that she has died, and they decide to put her on top of the mountain in this glass coffin where all the animals come to see her. And then a prince one day comes by and he says, can I buy Snow White? Can I buy this dead girl off you? So now trading in dead bodies. There's murder, poison, trading in dead bodies, suffocating. Okay, yeah, you can buy this dead body off us, of Snow White, because you think she's so beautiful. So it's like, okay. So then one of his henchmen are obviously me, because they're so clumsy that they drop the coffin as they're going to the castle, and as they jolt the coffin, the piece of poisonous apple that was in Snow White's throat, she gags it up. She spits it out. She gets the apple out of her throat, and then the king says, I'm going to love you forever. And she goes, okay, we're in love. That's it. I live in a castle. And then the evil queen goes to her mirror and it says, Snow White is the fairest of them all. And the queen gets an invitation to come to Snow White's wedding. Snow White's like, I invite you. And then when the queen is there, the prince heats up some iron shoes, puts them onto the evil queen and makes her dance in these iron shoes that are burning her feet, and makes her dance in them until she drops down dead. So it's not the Disney that we all know and love. I don't think I would read this to my child. If one day I'm lucky enough to have a child, I don't think I'd be going, and she dances till she drops down dead. Very dark, very sinister, but I did enjoy it. It is very repetitive, so it's not something that I'd like pick up and read again. But I read it, I believe, when I started the channel, and I said it's repetitive. And years later, here I am again, reading it again and saying, yeah, the same thing, but I still think it's a great story. It's inspired so many different stories. I still found it interesting. The poisonous comb, the corset lace, like, it was still interesting read. And I read it aloud on the channel, so I'll link that video down below. If you haven't read the original Brothers Grimm, then obviously you can just listen to my audiobook of it, which will be in the description. I then have a thriller novel. This is Mary Higgins Clark, Remember Me. I've done a full video on this, so I'll link it down below, my full book review. Loved it. Loved it. Mary Higgins Clark did it again. Fantastic thriller. So this is about a woman called Menly, who her son has died in a tragic accident, and years later she has another child called Hannah, and her husband are still kind of racked with the original tragedy that happened, and she's suffered with mental illness because of it. And they go to the Cape, which is where Menly's husband Adam grew up. So the Cape is this lovely seaside, beautiful town, and they move into this house which is called Remember House. That's why the book's called Remember Me. So they move into the house, and there's loads of different people. It's told from their different point of view. So there's an elderly man and woman, there's an estate agent who's Adam's best friend, there's the estate agent's stepdaughter who is helping Menly look after her daughter Hannah, and Menly is a famous author. She writes children's books, and she decides that she's going to write a children's book, and it'll be a historical book about the town. And then she starts hearing stuff about her house, that her house has a tragic story, and then she starts seeing things in the house and thinking, is it ghosts? Is it my mind? I can't really tell anyone because I've had mental health problems. I don't want anyone to think this is a problem or a sign of something coming back. Then, before the book starts, a murder has taken place. And that's that there was this really wealthy woman who she met this man. It was kind of like a shotgun wedding. And all of a sudden, she ended up dead. And it was a boat accident. And many people believe that her husband is a gold digger. And he killed her, and it wasn't really an accident. And Menly's husband, Adam, hears the story and decides that he is going to defend the boy and say, no, he didn't kill his wife. So then it goes into this murder story. There's an elderly man with his wife who has dementia, and his wife who has dementia learn all about the Remember House. So she's trying to remember things, but obviously she has dementia, and tell Menly that information. There is so much going on in this book. I loved it. It wasn't like other Mary Higgins Clark that I've read, though. I've read A Stranger is Watching and Where Are the Children, and they're thrillers. So in Stranger is Watching, it's in peril. It's kind of race against the clock. I don't want to give too much away, but that's what it is. In Where Are the Children are missing. Something's happened. Where are they? Whereas with this, the murder's already happened. So no one's in imminent danger. The murder's happened, and she's doing research for her book, and there's no direct threat. So it's a much more psychological book. I loved her talking about grief because her child, Menley's child, had died tragically. And then the babysitter who helps her look after her daughter Hannah, who was called Amy, her mother had died. So they were talking about grief and how when people say like, oh, grief gets better and everything, and talking about that, which I thought was really beautiful within it. So there were other moments away from the plot that were really stunning as well. I loved it. I loved and adored it. It was a different take from Mary Higgins Clark, much more psychological, but I loved it. Next up is just a little mention, and this is Flower Fairies of the Autumn by Cicely Mary Barker. She was an illustrator and a writer, and she used to write little poems about these flower fairies that were always related to a flower. So there'd be the thistle flower fairy, obviously related to the thistle plant, and it would have something in relation to do with the thistle plant in the poem that she wrote about them. So there's one that's the conker fairy, and these are all the plants of autumn. So there's a fairy who lives in the conker tree, who says, you know, boys come and try and bash me and smash me to try and get my conkers down. Just be patient. I'll drop my conkers when I'm ready. Don't you come trying to get them off my tree. And I loved that. I love the little personalities. I adore the Flower Fairies, all the Flower Fairy books. So I just thought I would mention it for anyone. If you haven't heard of the Flower Fairy books, they are absolutely stunning. I'll give you a little look of it. So gorgeous, the illustrations, and the poems are so funny and witty as well. So there's her illustration of the gorgeous fairy and the plant, and then something to do with the fairy that will also be to do with the plant, which I absolutely love. There was also a bit sinister, some of them, but like, I'm gonna cut you. I'm a thorn. I was like, whoa! I actually read this aloud on my Patreon, so if you're a Patreon, you've already heard this one. But I'll just do this little extract. The Song of the Nightshade Berry Flat Fairy. Why should you think my berries poisoned things? You fairies may look scared and fly away. The children will believe me when I say, my fruit is the fruit of kings. But all good fairies cry in an anxious haste, oh children, do not haste! About a poisonous plant, and the plant's like really trying to entice the kids, like, have a taste, have a taste. And the other fairies are like, no, stay away from it. Like, it has a sinister element within it, which I really liked. It was so funny, like, reading it aloud for the Patreon, because I didn't realise the sinister element, so I was so caught off guard when I was reading it. I was like, what the hell has happened to this book? But I like that kind of sinister twist within some of them, that some of them are good, the fairies, but some of them want to kill children. They're murderers. I have been reading aloud on the channel the Arabian Nights. So I have done the Tale of Scheherazade and the Trader and the Jinni. So the stories are really like long, like novellas. Like, they're not as small as what I thought they were going to be. Like 2 stories, and look how far we're already into the book just after 2 stories. So the story of Arabian Nights is about this king kills his virgin brides after he has made love to them. He kills them on the wedding night and then marries the next one the next day. And Scheherazade, he marries, and she kind of sacrifices herself for all women. She says, marry me, pick me, because she has a plan. So he marries her, and then he's about to kill her, and she goes, I'm a really good storyteller. Let me tell you a story. Have you heard this story? And he goes, okay, tell me. And then she waits every day and says, well, you know, I'll tell you the rest in the morning. So he's like, okay, I'll keep you alive till the next day. So the next day you can tell me the rest of the story. And she's such a great storyteller. So Arabian Nights is her telling the stories to the king. So stories will start, and Scheherazade said, and then it will get into the story, and how also she loops other stories as well. She's like, have you heard this story as well? Let me tell you. And it's obviously her fighting for her life throughout the book, that he won't kill her because she has such interesting stories. And eventually he decides not to kill her and to just keep her alive. But it's such a kind of fascinating setup, this whole setup with this woman telling stories, so this tyrannical king doesn't kill her. And then in these stories they have different life lessons. So the Trader and the Jinni is about the Jinni, this magic creature, has all these different people telling him their stories. So they're coming to him and saying, this animal is actually my brother. So they're all people who have an animal with them, a physical animal that is a family member of theirs who has wronged them in some way and then been turned into an animal. So one of them was a woman had turned a man's son into a calf and tried to get him to kill the calf, not knowing it was his son. So he had his wife turned into an animal and his son brought back to life. Another one, his two brothers, he had the very successful shop. His two brothers also were set up in business and they squandered their money. So he gave them money to help them out and they never helped him out and really conned him out of his fortune. So he turns his brothers into, I believe, 2 camels. And everyone's coming with a better story and saying, no, I have a better story. Let me tell you the story of my animal. I loved it. It was so magic. There is so much magic in the book and so magical, mystical creatures and lands, like stunning. Absolutely adoring Arabian Nights so far. I'm going to be reading the whole book on the channel, but I just adore it so much. I cannot recommend it enough. Oh, God, I'm loving it. I read the next story and I read half of it and my new microphone, I hadn't connected it properly. So I'm going to go back. So you should have already had an Arabian Nights story up, but because it didn't record properly, I'm going to re-record that one. And that one is absolutely fantastic. The new one I started is this fisherman is fishing and then all of a sudden he fishes out basically a genie. And the genie's saying, I'm going to kill you. I decided I was going to grant the first person 3 wishes, but you left it too long. And I haven't been found in like 100 and something years. So I decided whoever got me out, I'm just going to murder them. And I'm going to ask him, how do you want to be murdered? It's just like, whoa. That one is The Tale of the Fisherman and the Genie. And I was reading it like, this is crazy. This kind of interaction that they're having, this magical interaction. And so that will be the next one that will be read aloud on the channel. But I am adoring Arabian Nights so far. And then last but not least, I have some fairy tales that I've read aloud. This is a Hans Christian Andersen, and I have the book of 14 famous fairy tales. Obviously, every book you get is going to be kind of a slightly different translation, but these aren't abridged or summarized versions. These are the full versions. That's why I decided to pick them to read aloud on the channel, because I didn't want to read anything that had been abridged in any kind of way. So I will tell you what ones I have read on the channel. I have read The Little Mermaid, Princess and the Pea, The Nightingale, The Emperor's New Clothes, which I read like last month, October. Loved The Emperor's New Clothes. I really thought it was so with society at any point you can use The Emperor's New Clothes. So I felt some of the stories didn't really have a moral at the end. So I read this month as well The Little Match Girl, and I just thought that was a very sad tale, but I didn't get a deep moral from it, whereas The Emperor's New Clothes, 100% there's a moral in it. The Emperor's New Clothes is about an emperor who's very vain and he rules over everyone, and then 2 con artists come into his land and say, we will make you the most magnificent suit that no one else has. So he agrees. They then make him this suit, but every time he goes to see them, they say, look, here's your suit. And there's nothing there. It's invisible. And he just goes along with it. And then when they present to him his suit, it's nothing. It's invisible. And they say, look, but it's amazing. It's incredible. Can you not see it? Can you not see it with your own eyes? And he goes, yeah, I can see it, because he doesn't want to look foolish. So he says, yes, I can see it, even though he looks foolish because he's lying. So they get him to strip down so he's completely naked. He then goes out and walks among his people in his what he's calling his new clothes, but he's completely naked. Everyone is shocked and a child laughs, and then everyone laughs at him. But he says to his inner circle, how do these clothes look? And he's standing there completely naked, and he has somehow denied himself reality, that these clothes didn't exist, that he has been conned. His ego is too big to take that. So he believes that he's wearing clothes even though he's not, and all the people around him say, yeah, you're wearing clothes. They're great clothes to go along with the crowd. So what the moral of that, which I personally took, was it doesn't matter if everyone is saying the exact same thing and everyone's saying this is the truth. It doesn't mean that's the truth. And that actually herd mentality is a huge issue within society and always has been. And so just because everyone's saying you're in the minority, you have the wrong opinion, we all have the right opinion, we all know the right thing, doesn't mean that they actually know the right thing. It could be that they're all just being easily led. They don't want to seem foolish. They want to fall in line with everyone else. They don't want to cause a problem. And that's actually why they're going along with what they're going along with. Fantastic. Absolutely adored that. And The Little Match Girl, which is about a girl who's very poor. She sells matchbooks, and one day she sits and she lights one of the matches and she thinks of her grandmother, and her grandmother takes her off to heaven. And the next day her cold dead body is in the street, and everyone looks at her, how sad and pitying that she is. And then someone says it was almost like she had a smile on her face, and she did, because we learn through the story when she went up to heaven with her grandmother, the only person who had ever loved her, she was happy to go. She was happy to escape from this world, from her poverty, into heaven with her grandmother. She was happy for that. So it's a very odd story, I find. It's almost like happy in death, which maybe it's relief for death. Maybe it's kind of pro-euthanasia. I don't know. Like, she's so happy to die, to get away from this world. So I think you can interpret it. Depends, on your standpoint, how you would interpret it. But I loved them all. So the other ones that are in here, I don't think I'm going to read any more of these aloud. They're like The Ugly Duckling, Clumsy Hands. I may read The Steadfast Tin Soldier, maybe around Christmas time. But those fairy tales that I've read, I've absolutely loved and adored all of them. The Little Mermaid is probably still my favourite because it is so sinister, it's so creepy. That one still kind of lives on in my mind the most out of all of them. Oh no, The Nightingale actually, I don't know what I'm talking about. The Nightingale, I did love though, A Little Mermaid. I did absolutely adore that, but The Little Mermaid is probably, it has stayed with me the most because it's so creepy. But The Nightingale, oh, I absolutely adored that. I read that a lot on the channel as well. So I have playlists on my channel. If you go to my channel for videos, then it'll have a playlist section, and read aloud is where I have all the short stories that I've read aloud. Fairy tales, the Arabian Nights, everything is in that playlist. So I'm going to end this here. I hope you have enjoyed my wrap up, my book reviews of October. I feel like I had a great reading month. I read some classic fairy tales, and then obviously Arabian Nights, short stories from that, and then I managed to read 2 novels. So I'm very happy about that. My book club pick is of course the Murder, She Wrote book, which I will link down the video down below announcing that. I'm going to end it here. I, of course, see you soon. I'm going to be making videos probably every other day in November because I'm feeling so inspired to make videos. So I'm going to end it here, and I'll see you again soon for another video.